I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd fall for her brother-in-law, but as I stood there, watching Lucas walk through my front door, something inside me stirred. His smile, so different from Ryan's, made my heart flutter in a way it hadn't in years. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just the loneliness talking. But as the days passed and Lucas's laughter filled up once silent home, I found myself drawn to him like a moth to a flame. Was I really about to risk everything for a forbidden attraction? My story is long, but believe me, you won't regret hearing the ending. The silence in our house used to be a comfort, a peaceful respite from the chaos of the outside world. Now it feels like a heavy blanket, threatening to smother me with its weight. I used to relish the moments of quiet, but lately, they've become a constant reminder of my loneliness. My name is Sarah, and I've been married to Ryan for 15 years. He's a successful businessman, always on the move, chasing the next big deal. At first, I was proud of his ambition, even excited by the idea of being married to such a driven man. But as the years have passed, the excitement has faded, replaced by a gnawing emptiness that grows with each passing day. I find myself wandering through our home, touching the things that remind me of him, his favorite coffee mug, the watch he forgot to pack for his last trip, the framed photo of us on our honeymoon. These objects, once sources of comfort, now feel like relics from a different life. The routine of my days has become mind-numbingly predictable. I wake up alone, make coffee for one, and spend hours trying to fill the void left by Ryan's absence. I've tried everything: yoga classes, book clubs, even volunteering at the local animal shelter, but no matter how I try to occupy my time, I can't shake the feeling that something fundamental is missing from my life. Sometimes I catch myself talking out loud, just to hear a voice in the house. It's pathetic, really, but it's become a habit I can't seem to break. Ryan would love this new recipe, I say to no one as I cook dinner, or I wonder what Ryan would think of this show, as I curl up on the couch, surrounded by throw pillows that have never known the indent of my husband's body. The worst part is the nights. I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts I can't silence. I wonder where Ryan is, what he's doing, who he's with. Is he lying awake too, thinking of me, or has he fallen asleep easily, unburdened by the weight of our growing disconnect? I've tried to talk to Ryan about how I feel, but our conversations are always rushed, squeezed into the brief moments between his meetings or flights. I miss you, I say, my voice small and uncertain. I miss you too, honey, he replies, but the words sound hollow, rehearsed. I wonder if he even notices the tremor in my voice, the unspoken plea for more. Loneliness has become a physical ache, a constant companion that follows me from room to room. I find myself drawn to the windows, watching the world go by, imagining the lives of the people I see passing on the street. Do they feel this emptiness too, or are their homes filled with laughter, conversation, the warmth of shared experiences? I've started to notice things I never paid attention to before, the way the sunlight moves across the living room floor throughout the day, the sound of the neighbor's dog barking at precisely 3:15 every afternoon, the slight creak in the third step of the staircase. These little details have become my whole world, and I'm not sure if that's comforting or terrifying. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror and barely recognize the woman staring back at me. Where is the vibrant, confident Sarah who fell in love with Ryan all those years ago? When did I become this pale shadow, existing rather than living? I know I should be grateful. We have a beautiful home, financial security, and Ryan is a good man. He's never been unfaithful, never raised his voice in anger. But is this enough? Is a life half lived better than no life at all? The thought sends a shiver down my spine. It's dangerous territory, questioning the foundations of the life I've built. But once the seed is planted, it's hard to ignore. I find myself daydreaming about what my life could have been, what it could still be. I can't continue like this, drifting through my days like a ghost in my own home. Something has to change, even if I'm not sure what that change looks like yet. I stand up, smoothing down my dress with trembling hands. I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I know I need to do something. The moment I opened the door, my heart skipped a beat. There he stood, a vision so unlike the man I'd married, yet eerily familiar. Lucas, my brother-in-law, Ryan's younger sibling, flashed a smile that seemed to light up the entire porch. "Surprise, Sarah!" he exclaimed, his voice full of warmth and mischief. I found myself frozen, unable to form words. Lucas was everything Ryan wasn't: spontaneous, vibrant, and radiating an energy that seemed to pulse through the air between us. His presence filled the doorway, and I felt a rush of something I couldn't quite name. "I hope it's okay that I dropped by," he said, running a hand through his tousled hair. I was in the area and thought I'd say hello to my favorite sister-in-law. He turned to me and said, "It's so quiet here. How do you stand it?" His question hit me like a physical blow. How did I stand it? The truth was, I didn't know any more. But as Lucas's gaze met mine, I felt a flutter in my chest, a sensation I hadn't experienced in years. Over the next few hours, Lucas's energy seemed to seep into every corner of the house. He regaled me with stories of his travels, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. I found myself laughing more than I had in months, maybe even years. As we sat in the kitchen, sharing a pot of coffee, I couldn't help but notice the way Lucas leaned in when he spoke, how his hand occasionally brushed against mine as he reached for his mug. Each touch sent a jolt through me, awakening feelings I thought had long since died. "You know, Sarah," he said, his voice lowering conspiratorially, "I've always thought Ryan was the luckiest guy in the world. You're incredible." I felt my cheeks flush, a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the coffee. "Lucas, I began, but he cut me off with a gentle smile. "I mean it," he insisted. "You deserve to be appreciated, to feel alive." His words echoed in my mind long after he left that evening. I found myself standing in front of the mirror, really looking at myself. Was I still the woman Lucas saw? Could I be her again? As the days passed, of course, the rest of the story goes. As the days passed, I found myself looking forward to Lucas's visits with an eagerness that both thrilled and terrified me. We fell into a routine of sorts. He dropped by unannounced, always with some new adventure to share or a funny story to tell. One afternoon, as we walked through the local park, Lucas's hand brushed against mine. Instead of pulling away, I let our fingers intertwine. The contact sent a shiver up my arm, and I felt a rush of guilt mixed with exhilaration. "Sarah," Lucas said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I can't stop thinking about you." I knew I should pull away, should remind him of Ryan, of our family ties. But at that moment, all I could focus on was the warmth of his hand in mine, the intensity in his eyes as he looked at me. As we stood there, the world seemed to fade away. It was just Lucas and me, caught in a moment that felt both wonderful and dangerous. I realized with a start that I was developing feelings for him, feelings that went far beyond what a sister-in-law should feel. The line between familial affection and something more was blurring, and I found myself teetering on the edge of a decision that could change everything. Part of me wanted to step back, to remember my vows and the life I'd built with Ryan. But another part, a part that had been dormant for so long, yearned to take that step forward, to embrace the passion and excitement Lucas offered. As I stood in the kitchen, pouring 2 glasses of wine, my hands trembling slightly, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. But oblivious to what was about to happen, the air between Lucas and me crackled with an energy I hadn't felt in years. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Lucas's visits had become more frequent, and with each one, the line between familial affection and something more blurred further. I found myself counting the hours until I'd hear his knock on the door, my heart racing every time our eyes met. Tonight was different, though. There was an intensity in Lucas's gaze that made my breath catch in my throat. As I handed him his glass, our fingers brushed, and I felt a jolt of electricity shoot through me. I pulled away quickly, nearly spilling the wine in my haste. "Sarah," Lucas said softly, his voice low and husky, "I can't keep pretending that this is just a normal family visit." I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry despite the wine. "I know," I whispered, barely audible even to myself. We stood there, the silence stretching between us, heavy with unspoken words and forbidden desires. I knew I should step back, create some distance, but my body seemed to have a mind of its own. I found myself moving closer to Lucas, drawn by an invisible force I couldn't resist. His hand reached out, fingers gently tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. The touch sent shivers down my spine, and I closed my eyes, leaning into his palm. For a moment, I let myself imagine what it would be like to give in to these feelings, to let go of the guilt and shame that had been gnawing at me. But as quickly as the moment came, it passed. I jerked away, reality crashing back around me. "We can't," I said, my voice shaky but firm. "This isn't right." Lucas's face fell, a mix of disappointment and understanding crossing his features. "I know," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "But Sarah, I can't stop thinking about you." "About us?" I turned away, unable to meet his eyes. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. On one hand, I felt alive for the first time in years. The loneliness that had been my constant companion seemed to vanish when Lucas was around. But on the other hand, the weight of my wedding vows and the potential consequences of my actions pressed down on me like a physical force. I found myself rationalizing, trying to justify the growing intimacy between us. "We haven't actually done anything wrong," I thought to myself. "It's just harmless flirting." But deep down, I knew that it wasn't true. The emotional connection we were forming was just as dangerous, if not more so, than any physical affair. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lucas turned to me with a serious expression. "Sarah, I need to know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you feel the same way I do?" My heart pounded in my chest, the moment of truth finally upon us. I took a deep breath, ready to finally voice the feelings I'd been keeping bottled up for so long. But just as I opened my mouth to speak, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway shattered the moment. We both froze, watching as a familiar figure emerged from the vehicle. It was Tyler, Ryan's nephew, his unexpected arrival, like a bucket of cold water dousing the flames of our almost confession. As Tyler approached, his eyes darting between Lucas and me, I felt a wave of shame wash over me. The reality of what I'd been about to do hit me full force, and I struggled to compose myself. "Aunt Sarah," Tyler called out, his tone oddly strained. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Aunt Sarah," Tyler said, his voice laced with concern. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." The way he emphasized important made my stomach churn. I could feel Lucas tense beside me, his earlier warmth replaced by a cold, rigid posture. I tried to gather my thoughts, to form a coherent response, but my mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. "Tyler, what are you doing here?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on Lucas. "I think the better question is, what is Lucas doing here?" The accusation in his tone was unmistakable. Lucas stepped forward, his charm sliding into place like a mask. "Come on, Ty. I'm just visiting my favorite sister-in-law. Nothing wrong with that, right?" But Tyler wasn't buying it. He turned to me, his expression a mix of pity and disappointment. "Aunt Sarah, there's something you need to know about Lucas. He's not who you think he is." My heart raced as Tyler began to unravel the web of lies Lucas had spun. With each revelation, I felt my world crumbling around me. Lucas wasn't here by chance. He hadn't been dropping by out of familial affection. It had all been a calculated move, a game he'd been playing. "He's done this before," Tyler explained, his voice gentle but firm. "He has a habit of pursuing married women, especially those who might be feeling lonely or neglected." I couldn't look at Lucas. I couldn't bear to see if these accusations were true. But deep down I knew, of course, the rest of the story continues. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was ugly and painful. Tyler continued, filling in the gaps of Lucas's deception. The coffee shop meetings that weren't coincidences, the park walks that were strategically timed. Even the words he'd used, they were lines, rehearsed and perfected over time. I felt sick, used. The warmth and excitement I'd felt earlier twisted into something dark and shameful. How could I have been so blind, so desperate for attention that I'd fallen for such obvious manipulation? As the reality sank in, I found myself spiraling into a pit of self doubt and recrimination. Had I really been so transparent in my loneliness, so easy to read and exploit? The thought made me feel exposed, vulnerable in a way I'd never experienced before. I glanced at Lucas, hoping to see some sign of remorse, some indication that not everything had been a lie. But his face was a mask of cool indifference. He didn't even try to deny Tyler's accusations. "Is it true?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Was any of it real? Lucas shrugged, a small, cruel smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Does it matter? You got what you wanted, didn't you? A little excitement in your dull life." His words cut deep, exposing the raw wound of my insecurities. I'd been so caught up in the thrill of feeling desired, of feeling alive again, that I'd willingly blinded myself to the reality of the situation. As Lucas gathered his things to leave, I stood there, paralyzed by the weight of my choices. The silence in the kitchen was deafening, broken only by the sound of the front door closing behind him. Tyler approached me cautiously, like I was a wounded animal. "I'm sorry, Aunt Sarah. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't stand by and watch him manipulate you like that." I nodded, unable to form words. The shame and guilt were overwhelming, threatening to consume me. What had I almost done? How close had I come to destroying my marriage, my life, for a lie? As the reality of the situation sank in, I felt a tidal wave of emotions crash over me. Anger at Lucas for his deception, disgust with myself for being so easily fooled, fear of what might have happened if Tyler hadn't intervened, and underneath it all, a deep, aching sadness for the loneliness that had made me so vulnerable in the first place. I sank into a chair, my legs no longer able to support me. Tyler sat across from me, his presence a silent comfort in the storm of my thoughts. What do I do now? I whispered, more to myself than to Tyler. He reached out, gently squeezing my hand. "You start by forgiving yourself, Aunt Sarah. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do next." Tyler's words echoed in my mind as I stumbled to the bathroom, desperate to splash some cold water on my face. But when I looked up, the reflection staring back at me was a stranger. Who was this woman with haunted eyes and trembling lips? And more importantly, could I ever learn to trust her again? I gripped the edges of the sink, my knuckles turning white. I forced myself to maintain eye contact with my reflection. The weight of my actions pressed down on me, threatening to crush what little remained of my self-esteem. How could I have allowed myself to be so easily manipulated? How could I have forgotten the promises I'd made to Ryan, to myself? The silence of the house seemed to mock me, amplifying the sound of my ragged breathing. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself, but all I could see was Lucas's face, the mask of indifference, as Tyler exposed his true nature. The pit in my stomach deepened as I realized how close I'd come to throwing away everything for a lie. I opened my eyes again, forcing myself to face the truth. The woman in the mirror looked worn, defeated, but somewhere beneath the shame and the guilt, I saw a flicker of something else. Determination, perhaps, or maybe just the desperate need to make things right. I thought about Ryan, probably sitting in some airport lounge, completely unaware of how close I'd come to betraying him. The guilt threatened to overwhelm me again, but I pushed it back. Tyler was right. I needed to forgive myself if I was ever going to move forward. But how? How do you forgive yourself for something so monumental? I remembered reading once about the importance of self-compassion in the healing process. The article had talked about treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a friend in a similar situation. I tried to imagine what I'd say to a friend who'd found herself in my position. "You made a mistake," I whispered to my reflection, but you stopped before it went too far. "You're human, and humans make mistakes." The words felt hollow at first, but as I repeated them, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. I thought about the steps I needed to take to rebuild trust, not just with Ryan, but with myself. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Trust, once broken, is like a shattered mirror. You can put the pieces back together, but you always see the cracks. But I was determined to try. I owed it to Ryan, to our marriage, to the life we'd built together, and I owed it to myself, to become the kind of person I could respect Again, I took a deep breath and looked at my reflection once more. This time, I forced myself to see beyond the guilt and shame. I saw a woman who had made a terrible mistake, yes, but I also saw a woman who was strong enough to face the consequences of her actions. A woman who was willing to do the hard work of rebuilding. I thought about the moment Lucas had first arrived, how alive I'd felt. But now I realized that feeling wasn't about Lucas at all. It was about me, about the parts of myself I'd forgotten. The vibrant, confident woman I used to be wasn't gone, she was just buried beneath years of routine and neglect. I didn't need Lucas or anyone else to make me feel alive. I needed to rediscover that spark within myself. As I stood there, I made a decision. I would tell Ryan everything, not because I wanted to hurt him or ease my own guilt, but because our marriage deserved honesty. We'd built our life together on trust, and if we were going to move forward, we needed to start from a place of truth. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Ryan might not forgive me, might not want to work through this. The thought made my heart ache, but I knew I had to be prepared for that possibility. But whatever happened, I was done with secrets and lies. I was ready to face the consequences of my actions, to do the work of rebuilding, whether that meant salvaging my marriage or learning to stand on my own. I took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back at me still looked tired and a little scared, but there was something else there now, a glimmer of hope, of determination. As I stood there, watching Tyler's retreating figure, the weight of my actions settled heavily on my shoulders. The house felt different now. As I stood there, watching Tyler's retreating figure, the weight of my actions settled heavily on my shoulders. The house felt different now, charged with the electricity of my near betrayal. I couldn't help but wonder how many other women had fallen for Lucas's practiced charm, his calculated gestures of affection. My advice to you is to never fall for such things, please. I love you. Don't forget to subscribe and like.